Hello everybody, pleasure to be here. Let's just
Hi everyone.
get up on the stool. It's great to be speaking to Unbound Group today and to Victoria. I do always like talking to a footwear brand or a fashion brand because I feel like there's a bit of scrutiny of what we're wearing, our sort of shoes or my jacket, which is always a good start. I'll just do a little intro to Unbound Group and Victoria to start off before we get into it. So yeah, Unbound Group are the owner of Hotter Shoes, who've been making shoes in Skelmersdale in Lancashire since 1959, I think I'm right in saying, focusing on comfort and the sort of 55 plus market. They've recently launched a multi-brand platform which has some third-party brands on there as well, like Geox and Birkenstock. And where I wanted to start to talk to you, Victoria, is about your career, because I think what's interesting is when I sort of look at your CV on LinkedIn, is that you've got experience at Shop Direct Group, which famously roots in mail order and back to the 1930s, I want to say, 1920s, where you were head of sales and marketing for multi-channel retail brands. Then you spent some time at Misguided. Although I think that was pre-Love Island, possibly, but this
that was the brand on Love Island rather than myself. Yes, it was definitely pre-Love Island.
And that was, online pure play. And now you're at Hotter Shoes, which again, sort of back into multi-channel. So I guess I wanted to start there and just ask you about that sort of arc of your career and how those two things compare, multi-channel to pure play.
Perfect, thank you, Ben. I think one of the first things to acknowledge is I appear to have worked for businesses that have been going for years. So 1959 is definitely when our business commenced starting footwear production, and Shop Direct now, Very Gruffen has been a 10-year partner of Movable Inc. They started, as you said, in the sort of late 1930s. With businesses that have been going for some time, I think what's common to both of them is the need to change and innovation and pioneering technology and essentially continuing to push forward and stress test your customer mindset, stress test what's going on with your product assortment is common to both. Critically, the fundamental difference between my current business, which is omni-channel, and some of my prior roles, is the beauty of being able to harness consumer across all parts of the customer journey. And I think online pure play definitely has its role. Certainly the flight to digital, which we heard Becky Francis talk about earlier upstairs, happened and was happening anyway as an underlying trend. But with the pandemic, it was accelerated. What I love about what's happening in the marketplace is how brands now are harnessing the retail atmosphere and making that experience brand-centric, consumer-centric, and a hub to collect lots of data. And I think that's what's unique about an omni-channel brand as a perfect opportunity for marketers.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, those distinctions, whether or not you feel they are sort of eroding slightly between different types of retailers. I was reading about Warby Parker. I think over 50% of their sales are now from retail, which obviously, you go back a few years and they're synonymous with were originally a pure play. And then, I've read about interesting things that Hotter has done, sort of pop-up style. So is that something that, do you see that as continuing a part of your strategy, sort of pop-ups in places like shopping centres as a way of where perhaps you don't have lots of stock, but you're doing sort of guided shopping? Is that something you see as part of the future of a multi-channel retail? Yeah,
I think it depends on the consumer, and the core consumer of our audience is, as you described earlier, slightly older, 55 plus. And what's wonderful about digital is, as you've seen from all of the client case studies today, you can really target and personalise the right message. But you can't always deliver on that brand experience. And what Shah was describing earlier this morning is the beauty of the brand experience rather than just being customer experience. I wouldn't say it's only possible within the physical environment, but it's more easy to execute with the human touch. And what's exciting for myself and my team as marketers is the likes of Da Vinci will give us the ability to humanise digital. But there is still a role for the physical, and certainly we did contract our retail estate. We're 25 stores across the UK only. They all perform, but we now have the opportunity, like some of the examples that Saul shared from Currys, about how to use our people in those stores to try and drive the digital experience. And I think pop-up has a role. It has a role in the marketing remit. If you measure it on performance, however, it perhaps wouldn't stand the test of time against your email marketing, but certainly the longer-term play from a brand perspective is something that I think we've proven to be effective, and we'll use it sporadically and tactically.
That's probably a good point to go on to then at performance versus brand. I was going to talk to you about the marketplace sort of strategy. Maybe we can come on to that in a moment. So it's something that last week I was at the Festival of Marketing my company Centaur put on, and there was a lot of talk about, this Binet and Field long and short of it, which has been around for a while now, but people, I suppose, at times of short-term activation are thinking again about what does this mean longer term. Is that sort of what those debates look like within Hotter in terms of long versus short?
Well, they're pretty tasty. Certainly myself and our CFO get into lots of vibrant and colourful discussions about the benefits of performance versus brand, and it's always the age-old problem: how does one measure the benefit of brand disproportionate to performance? There's been tons of studies, McKinsey have done plenty, but if you are looking at the here and now, which we all do, we've heard today about many uplifts in click-through rates, conversion rates, all of which are terribly important metrics, and the proof point of performance marketing enables it to survive, continue and thrive. Brand, you can have brand metrics, you can have econometrics, but often it's the lost impact if you don't advertise. And certainly, you can do above the line advertising, or your physical presence. Our high street contraction saw a direct correlation with our reduction in our brand awareness. I couldn't put a marketing dollar loss next to it. But I think it's very much the challenge at the moment, certainly less so about the pandemic and more about the current economic crises, is the challenge being that marketers are expected to drive profitability over and above marketing sales growth or customer activation. And I think that's a huge flaw that many businesses are expecting of their marketing division. Certainly, there's no point in going for the vanity of sales. We have to be cognizant of profit. But if you're constantly chasing profit, one might argue, depending on the market, you are in an ever-decreasing circle. So my passion and my raison d'etre in all my career has been to keep the customer first and try and create the most appropriate synergy and marriage between customer, product and brand. I lean more so to the scientific, analytical side of performance, but I do think that to be devoid of brand is a big risk. And emotion is very much something in the storytelling marketing handbook that we can't lose sight of.
Yeah, and listening across the course of today, that debate about send more email, make more money, are there particular areas that you're looking at, in CRM, like personalizing frequency, that sort of play into that debate? Have you tried anything recently that tries to sort of walk that line between CLV and short-term sales?
Yeah, and I think it shouldn't really be a debate because it's a fact-based conversation. We're very fortunate as marketers, albeit it does mean that we become a little bit jack of all trades, to be hugely analytical and to be able to justify the performance of said campaign. The sort of send more emails is typically answered with a rather wry smile from me and my CRM team to whichever person chooses to ask it, on the basis of we actually send multi-million emails. It just happens that they are typically sent out 3, 4, 5 times a week. The performance of the database is something that we look at from a lifetime value perspective as well. So certainly if you look at campaign ABC, there is an opportunity to add a 4th, 5th, but then the sensitivity of that subscribe element means that the debate is closed quite quickly. Whether that is a problem that other people have across their businesses or in the boardrooms, we invariably find the bigger challenge at the moment is not the merchants, so sort of in UK businesses more the sort of buying and merchandising function and the traders, but they will say, you need to sell me more of these products. I have too much inventory of X, can you sell more of these? So it's less about a prescriptive, can you do this in email, and more a challenge. And the thing that we're trying to resist the most now is taking bash and blast classic old school email and moving it into broadcast promotions, because that will just be yet another trap that I think brands can fall into. So personalisation of message, context and pricing is something that I think is going to be increasingly important.
Yeah. And I see that if I go and browse on, the Unbound website, and there's an element of content in there, there's sort of the inspiration element. And I know we've heard today about sort of discovery-based personalization versus reinforcement. Is that, do you think that's something that we've got a handle on in e-commerce and retail when you're selling shoes? Because I know there are, in the past, I'm thinking of sort of, you think about M&S when they re-platformed a few years ago, and they went very much to a magazine format, and that sort of slowly was eroded slightly. I mean, do you still see product as the key driver?
I personally do. That said, I think it varies by brand and it varies by consumer type. So I don't think there's a definitive answer that will suit everybody. With regards to Unbound Group, we only launched with a lowercase l back in 1st of August. It's a multi-brand, multi-product marketplace for all intents and purposes, and our propositional USP is to be that we're a content curator. However, we don't have all that content, and we're not yet in a brilliant personalisation curation place because we've only just opened the doors. What's interesting about the sort of marriage between product and then sort of the personalisation element and how that might work. In a footwear business, we only have one single product category. So once you've got a pair of shoes, how many more do you need? It varies, but on average, our sort of consumers are shopping about 1.7 times per year, which compared to multi-product brands is much lower. Multi-product brands often get purchase frequency of sort of 6-fold, and it will vary again into beauty, etc. What's interesting about the likes of our partnership with Movable and what we do in email is even within a single product category of footwear, we can do next style shopping, we can do the propensity to purchase, and equally at a point of lapse and try and differentiate the journey. We've taken that insight and the insight of our 4.6 million consumer database and said, actually, there's more products and services that we can offer this consumer, which is materially underserved in the 55 plus market. So what we've chosen to do is extend the offering, and we're really optimistic about the capabilities of our tech stack to personalise even better from a product lens. Content will absolutely be used to help sort of get the emotive message across. But I think it's about using the content to enable the commerce rather than just having content or just having commerce. We heard earlier from the Warner Brothers, there's some great examples about how to use content, but it's about making sure that contextual content and product, I think, are connected.
Yeah. I was going to sort of raise the question. I was reading Helen Edwards recently in Marketing Week about effectiveness and the sort of effectiveness culture. And I think we've seen so many good examples today of the benefits of optimization, at least when it's done creatively. And, we've seen great uplift on the Sky Bet, Paddy Power, that Uber header example was just quite mind-blowing, really. But I wondered if there's, particularly because you've got a fairly new brand as such in Unbound, if you think, what percentage of your sort of team are you trying to drive towards that effectiveness culture, and how do you break out of that? Just to give you some of the stuff that Helen Edwards was writing about, her piece recently was called The Metrics of Maybe. And she wrote that every marketer should spend at least 10% of the budget doing something wrong. And she says she didn't mean accidentally wrong, getting things messed up when your intentions were faultless. All of us are capable of that. But actually, sort of once you define the means, and you sort of you're also defining the ends. So is there a way of making sure is there a division between effectiveness and creativity, or is there something that sort of combines the two in some way?
I think firstly, Helen's a legend, and I would like to introduce her to our CFO and encourage at least 10% plus of my marketing budget as R&D. Fundamentally, I think optimization is where we've all led to as marketers. So A/B MVT testing is standard. It's old hat now, isn't it? So I think that there's an element there where fail fast is the mantra of many sort of digital activities and sort of marketing. Do I think, however, that there is opportunity to be more innovative? Absolutely. There's a risk somewhat that the big data that we have available to us is suppressing true creativity and growth. And as I was saying before about brand versus performance, the brand piece, you know, if you're going to spend 1 million, 5 million, whatever your quantum is on a TV campaign, or move a creative direction on into a different space, naturally it carries some risk. But invariably that risk may well pay off, particularly if you steeped it in insight to develop this conclusion. And I do fear that arguably we do things that we either know work and stop the things that don't work, and before you know it, the sort of funnel of opportunity is ceasing to fill up a little. So I think Helen's made a valid point. In the current economic crises, I'm not sure to what extent we would all be terribly successful at sort of R&D or more innovation. I think the innovation lends itself to the content of those campaigns now, rather than the sort of frequency or segmentation of them.
Yeah. Actually, watching Uber just beforehand, I was thinking about a piece. I mean, I read a quote from the Global Chief Data Officer at Wunderman Thompson, Alex Steer, and the headline of his quote was basically, "Personalisation is a creative act," was his headline. Again, I won't read reams out of an article to you, but the specific point was he talks about a successful approach to personalisation brings together creative thinking, predictive data analysis, and technology design as early as possible. And that certainly brought to mind the Uber slide about having engineering on early doors if you're going to make personalization or personalized journeys that are in some way feel creative. I know our session is billed as sort of what's the future of digital marketing, which is sort of an interesting thing, especially because, I mean, some people might contest the term digital marketing, you know, as perhaps digital isn't needed anymore as a on the front of that phrase. But is there anything you think, you know, I know we've talked a lot about machine learning today, but Hotter has got, you know, some augmented reality implementations and such. Is there anything particularly that you think we haven't covered today on that is, you know, the next 2 years or so for Hotter?
I think certainly it has been covered perhaps in the general part of the agenda for today, but in our conversation what we've not talked about is that very sentiment of AI, which I think predictive analytics, predictive next best action. Personalisation is great, and it does need the people in your team to interplay with the content and the messaging. The more we can utilise machine-based learning and action, though, I think that in itself will help progress forward some of the commercial benefits. And for us, our 3 key focuses over the course of the coming sort of 6 to 12 months is definitely looking at how to manage that omni-channel experience even better, single customer view. Secondly, it's about personalisation through product assortment and pricing rather than just marketing messaging, albeit that's still really relevant. And the third piece is about thinking broader about the customer lifetime value rather than singularly focusing on the campaign effectiveness.
That's 3 great takeaways from the session. Thank you, Victoria. We're coming up to time. So yeah, thank you for joining me on stage. It's been a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Cheers.